Alrighty, so what we're going to do instead is, yeah, maybe we will hit chapter 13, but first off, I want to play with making a graphical user interface. And those are always kind of challenging just because of the little nitpicky naming things where we rename each field, but we'll give it a shot. So let's go ahead. Did not mean to launch that. Go away. I feel so cool and awesome. I'm running Windows on a Mac, so I can run the application side by side. Of course, this one's Mac available too. I think we're about on lecture queue. If not, that'll work anyways. Well, what we're going to do is we're not going to make a main class. If we do make a main class, the first thing we're going to have to do is to delete it or to set our main class equal to something else. So if you've already made it and you made a main class, I don't know, recreate the project or just accept that you're going to have to delete it in a minute. But I don't want to make a main class because the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a JFrame to it, and that needs to be our main class. So over here in source packages, I'm going to add a JFrame form. What we call it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to leave it new JFrame form, right? Or I could call it lecture Q, but if I have another one called lecture, well, I guess that'd be a good way to find out if I accidentally made a main class or not. So lecture Q. All right, now what we should do is we should learn how to create these user interfaces by hand, or at least we should have a lecture on creating our own JFrame and adding our own buttons to it, things like that. But it is so easy to create them in comparison with the form designer that that's what we're going to do. So what I want to do is to let us have a little application where we can type in 4 numbers in a row, and it'll display 4 hexadecimal variants of it, and then 4 binary variants of it. So we're going to need 4 text fields, and then we're going to need 8 text areas. So I'm going to grab a text field and kind of maybe not even resize it, and another one, and slow me down if I get too far ahead, another one, and another one. They do not need to be that large because each one's going to hold just a number between 0 and 255 if we do it right. I mean, it can hold a larger number, nothing wrong with that. But what I'm going for is to make it look like an IP address, right? Because an IP address looks like that, right? Each one of these being 1 byte long. So maybe we'll check our input and display an error message if something winds up being more than 1 byte, which would be a value greater than 255. So let's add some text telling them what to do here. But actually, let's go ahead and fill in the default contents of these. And we could do that by coming over here and clicking properties and finding where it says JText field 1, JText field 2, and so on. I'm just going to right click on it and edit the text to make it say 0. Do the same thing for that one. Right click, edit text 0. It looks like I'm going to have to resize them again. Right click, edit text 0. Right click, edit text 0. And you know what? Maybe we don't need to do the binary version of it. Maybe we'll just do, 4 areas underneath where we display the hexadecimal version of it. Or we could even just make 1 text field that displayed the hexadecimal version of it. That might be fun. Maybe we'll do that. All right, these are too itchy-bitchy, so I'm going to try to size them out a little bit. All righty. So I'm going to add text telling them enter IP address as decimals or as in base 10. So we need a text field. We need to put our text area. Wait, no, that looks a little bit too aggressive. Where's just a regular text? It's called a label. Here we go. So I'm going to grab the label and drag it out and say IP address, except I'm going to call it IP4 because an IP6 address has more of these fields, a lot more, not just 6 of them. So IP4 address in base 10. Hopefully whoever's using this knows what base 10 means. And these aren't real good looking. I haven't made them all the correct width and stuff like that. And honestly, I'm not going to keep messing with it until it looks right. And if you feel like it, you can get really fancy by dragging a panel in and copying, cutting and pasting these things and putting them in a panel. I don't know necessarily that I would do that. So I'm going to undo that thing that I just did. Right, panels are a way of grouping parts of the interface together. And if you make the background of the panel a different color, so it'll kind of stand out, you could do that, right? I could stick all of these things in there instead. I don't think I can just drag them. Maybe I can. Huh. Well, that kind of worked. But that's just superfluous, right? That's just, you know, to make it look kind of pretty. I think I'm going to undo all of that until the panel's gone. Or click on the panel and then hit the delete key. Well, that didn't work either. Cut it. All right, I think it's gone. I hope it is. If not, it's not going to hurt anything. And I'm going to put a text field underneath it to hold the hexadecimal equivalent of it. So instead of being decimal numbers, 128.2.3.4, it's going to be hexadecimal numbers. And sometimes you see that. Sometimes you see them expressed as that. So let's go and grab another text field. And that one's called J text field 5. And if we were really clever, we would be renaming these to useful things like N1, N2, N3, and N4, N5, or, you know, output, something like that. And that's where these things always get a little bit difficult to follow along with, because if you forget to rename one of these, and I have, then when we start adding code to it to address that, it becomes a problem. But I'm going to go ahead and do that anyways. So I'm going to right click on it and do change variable name and just call it N1, right? And I'm going to do that for the next one. Right click on it, rename. Where's my rename option? Change variable name, N2. Right click, change variable name, N3. Right click, change variable name, N4. And why don't we just change this one to hex, right? We could give it a better name if we wanted to, but I think hex is okay because that's what its output's going to be. Now this is going to be not a read, a read-only field. They're not supposed to be able to change that. I mean, maybe it'd be kind of neat if we let them change the numbers here and it rechange these up here, but instead they're going to fill in those numbers, press a button, and it's going to fill that in. So we need to make this so that it cannot be changed. Well, if you look over here in the properties, there's a little checkbox that we can check. Editable, it's currently checked, but we're going to uncheck it, right? And there's two ways I can get to it. One is just through properties over here, or I can right click on it and choose properties. And I don't want it to be editable. And I really don't want it to have this information here, right? This J text field information. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make some default text that's a little bit better than that. And 0000 in hex in the format that I'm imagining looks like this: 00.00.00.00, where each one of these is going to be a hex number. I hope we can get to make it look like that. We're going to try real hard. And we need a button that'll trigger it all. Oopsie, I double clicked on the button. That's not what I meant to do. It's not going to hurt it though. I just need to go back into the design mode. So I click on design and there I'm back. I can right click on it and edit the text. And I can make it say convert to hex. Or maybe I could choose some other button name, but that's good enough, right? Now I want to see what it looks like. I've done a whole bunch of changes. It's not going to actually do anything, but at least it'll run. And so when I run it, since we did not make a main class, this project does not have a main class set. So when I ran it, I got an error message to that effect. It's real easy to fix. I just select the main class and click OK. Or I could have gone over here to my project, right-clicked, chosen properties, run, and then I could select my main class, right? I could have done it there, but it sure is easy just to, and if you have to change the main class from one thing to another, that's how you do it. But it's just as easy for now to run it and choose that. And how does it know what a main class is? If it's got a main method, if it's got static void main in it, then it knows that it qualifies to be a main class. All right, so I run it and here's our little user interface, right? And I'm going to be able to type in numbers in it. Doesn't do anything, right? Because we haven't activated this button, made it actually do anything. But looks okay to me. Maybe I want to drag this button underneath, you know. You can always get really fancy making these things. That's enough. I'm not going to get too fussy with it. All right. So this button needs to call a method inside our class. So if I double click on that button, it creates a method inside the JFrame class. And when I double click on it, we see J button 1 action performed. Now, if I had given that button a better name, if I had right clicked, whoops, on that button and given it a better name, that would have been a good idea. And then the method created from it would have had a better name as well. But I don't care. We only have one button, so I'm just going to leave it J button 1 action performed. So we good so far? I don't know who's working along with me or if anybody's actually typing or just watching. Either way is cool.
So when I tried to run the program, it does not recognize any classes that I could add for it.
Okay. That's interesting, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to fix that. I hope so. Go into Designer, double click on the button, and scrolling up and down and see if there's a main method.
Yeah. Public
Okay.
void main string args.
Yeah. So right click on your lecture, your project, go to properties, choose run, and click browse and see if it pops up there. It'd be nice if it did.
It still says no main classes found.
Okay. So our problem is actually, I don't know what our problem is. I don't know why it's not finding that. What happens if you build it without trying to run it? This is just a stab in the dark, but if you take clean and build and run it like that first, and then you try to run it.
Let's see. Okay, build successful. Yeah, it found it now.
Oh, okay. Well, I wonder why. I wonder why that worked and not the other. Okay, good. I'm glad I fixed it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right. So I'm going to go into Designer. I'm going to double click the button again. It's going to take me to the method. This is what I need to code. What do I need to do? I need to get the I'm just getting rid of that because I keep clicking on it. I need to get the 4 numbers out of these strings. Everything you type in on a form is a string, even though it looks like a number. So we don't have the benefit of using .nextInt or anything like that to pull the data in. It comes as a string and we've got to convert it by hand. Well, that's not bad. We can do that. We're just going to use integer.parseInt to convert it to a number. But got to do it first. So going back into the source, maybe we declare 4 integers. Int I1, I2, I3, I4, and that print is amazingly small. Is it going to let me zoom it in? No. All righty. Where do they hide the preferences on the Mac version? There. That might be a little too large, but let's take a look. And that'll probably be okay. All right, so we have those 4 variables. We need to convert the 4 strings into those 4 variables. And if we were smart, we would add some exception handling so that if it blows up, we could display an error. Why don't we at least pretend we're going in that direction and create a variable called OK that we can set to true. And then we can make the exception handler, if we bother to add it, set it to false. But we might not do that. But at least we have the flag there that we could use if we so chose. I can think of other things that we might want to use that for, right? What if the number that they type in is too large? We might need an error string variable so that we could pop up an error message. So string S error for error string. And normally when I declare it like that, I do S capital E. And I'm going to make it equal to empty blank. Now we don't have a place on our form here to hold an error string, but we could, or we could just display it in a pop-up message. All righty, let's get these numbers out. I1 whoops. I wonder what that looks like when it's recorded. All right, I1 equals capital I, integer, we're going to use the parseInt method, integer.parse int with a capital N. And now we need to get that piece of data out of that N1 control. Can I just type N1 dot get text in parentheses, semicolon. So since it's text, since the control has text in it, we have to call get text to get the text out, and then we call parseInt to turn it into a number. Now, if you don't remember the names of your controls, don't type this. I'm going to delete it immediately, but this dot, and then you can scroll up and down and look at the name of your, of your variables and what type they are. And I really don't mind typing, this dot in front of that N1, but since I remembered it and it's looking nice and clean, I'll stick with that. I2 is equal to, why don't I just copy and paste that and change all the 1s to 2s and the 3s into 4s? Now we need to make sure that they're not negative and they're not larger than 255 because that's the maximum value that you could hold in a single byte. And the IP address is a sequence of bytes. So if parentheses, I1 is less than 0 or two vertical bars, shift backslash I1 greater than 127, whoops, 255, then it's a problem. And why am I using two greater than? How about one greater than? Then it's a problem. So curly braces, okay, equals false, and S error equals each digit must be between 0 and 255, end quote, semicolon. And again, I'm just going to copy this and make it say I2 and I3 and I4. Or I could build up one mega if statement that had all of that in it, right? You know, mixing some ands and stuff like that, but I'm not gonna. Instead, I would find it faster to just copy that and paste it. So copy that, paste it, paste, paste, paste. All right, so we have I1. This is going to be I2. This is going to be I3. Here we're going to have I4. Now, the fact that this looks so repetitive, I'm not really liking, but I don't see a way to simplify it, except, like I said, to make a great big if statement that had, you know, all 8 of these conditions in it. So I'm just going to leave it like that, despite the fact that I'm not real fond of the way that it looks. All righty. If it's not okay, we would want to display an error message. So if parentheses, exclamation mark, okay. I guess let's just set that text field, right? The text field could just be that error message. What was the name of our text field? I don't recall. So this, whoops, why did you go back? This dot hex, that was my text field. Dot set text, again, everything has to be text. We get the text when we read it, and when we write it back out, it's going to be more text. So this dot hex dot set text, parentheses, S error in parentheses. Else, good news. And that good news is that we can convert these to hex. All right. Now, one thing I don't remember is if we can use %x in order to convert it with string.format. Because if we can't, here's how I would wind up doing it. I would wind up doing something like this, and I don't really want to. So don't necessarily type this. String s is equal to integer dot to binary string I. Whoops, I saw it and then it disappeared. Now, I don't like this version because why isn't it coming up? Anyways, to binary string doesn't allow me to set that I want it to be 2 digits wide, right? And so it might just display a dot rather than the 0a dot that I want to see on it. That's a fast way. It's an easy way of converting something to binary string, but I don't think that's going to do the trick. So let's do string s equals string.format, and maybe %x, %2x dot, %2x dot, %2x dot, %2x will do it, just like printf. And you know how %2d would reserve 2 spaces for an integer number, and %.3f or whatever would create a floating point number with 3 decimal places? This should create a sequence of 4 hexadecimal values separated by periods, where each hexadecimal value contains 2 digits, 2 hex digits. padding it out with a 0 in front if need be. All right, I haven't passed in the placeholders yet. So after the quote, but before the parentheses, I need to pass in our 4 variables, I1, comma, I2, comma, I3, comma, I4. In parentheses, semicolon. So Lindy, how do you do this? Do you have 2 computers going so that you can watch the video on one screen, or do you just move the video window around and have your program in another?
Right now I just have it, my laptop in split screen.
Okay, all right.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered about that. I've seen some people watching the videos on their phones, and there's really no way you can see well. All righty. So we have that string. Now let's set the text of our hex field with that new string we've created. So hex dot, or I could have typed this dot hex, right? Set text with a capital T, S in parentheses, semicolon. And now I'm torn. Am I going to get rid of this dot in front of that one or put it in front of here? I think I'm going to get rid of it. However, if you typed in hex dot set text and you got an error there, you would need to figure out the actual name of the control if I hadn't renamed it. And you could type in this dot and eyeball your controls and go, oh, it looks like I have one over here still called JText field. And how am I going to fix that? I'm going to go back in the designer, right click on my field, change its variable name. Well, that's actually a button, isn't it? I might want to change the color of my button right while I'm here. Convert to hex, and I want the background to be slightly different. I don't know. Don't know why I'm bothering. There we go. No, that looks terrible. And that didn't do a dang thing. Forget it. All right, so back to the source. Well, that took me somewhere strange. Here we go. All right. So I think that's all we needed to do. I think it'll run now. Hammer and broom it. Run. And here we go. Let's type in, let's just leave it all zeros and press convert to hex. And it didn't fill it with leading zeros. It preserved 2 spaces, but it didn't fill it with leading zeros. And to do that, this wasn't an intentional error, by the way. Between the percent sign and the 2, I need to put a 0 that says padded out with leading zeros. And I need to do that 4 times. So after every percent sign, there needs to be 0 to X, not just percent 2X. All right, that didn't blow up. Let's test an error condition. I type in a -1. All right, this field is definitely not large enough to display my error message, right? So I might want to edit my user interface to create a longer space. Messes up my beautiful little user interface, but that's okay, all right? Now let's run it again. Five, -1, right? -1's not possible. Okay, good. Each digit must be between 0 and 255. Very good. All right, let's test it out for reals. Let's put in some good numbers. Well, if I go to has IP with a Z instead of an S in the word has, it tells me my IP address, 68.97.96.168. I'm going to type that in. 68 tab 97 tab 96 tab 78. Now there's things we could do to make the user interface a little bit nicer. When it's tabbing, it's just tabbing to the field, but it's not selecting the text, right? It'd be fun to figure out how to make it to select the entire text as soon as you tab into the field so that you didn't have to move your cursor around to select the whole text. It's all right. I don't see anything wrong with the way it is right now. Okay, and there's our IP address, and it's all in lowercase. I kind of wish that E was in uppercase. Remind me how to convert to uppercase in Java. After we've made our string, can we say S is equal to S dot to uppercase? Yeah, I bet we can. Since my program's running, I need to kill it. Press a little X over here. Run it again. All right, I'm just going to type in FF, or excuse me, 255 here because I know that turns into FF down at the bottom. Now, see, these aren't quite wide enough to hold a 3-digit number, so I can go back in and edit my user interface again to make these places a little bit wider. All right, now it's uppercase. I think that's much prettier. So the last little nitpicky thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make these fields wider still. I wonder if there's a way that you could select all 4 of them and make them wide. I wonder if there's a way that you could select all 4 fields and, you know, tell them that you want them to be the same size. I don't know. Preview design, what does that do? Yeah, all right. For some reason, it's showing my cursor there. Apparently, I accidentally stuck a little user interface element right there. I need to delete that if all possible. I don't know when that showed up there. Okay. One more try and then we're going to stop. Yeah, let's type in those numbers from the icon has IP again. $68, $97. See, if we were really cool, maybe we'd make it to where you type in a number and hit the return key and it would jump to the next one. You can do fancy things with this. 96 and 78. Convert to hex. All right, neat. And this is a read-only thing, but since it is a text control, they could highlight all the text and copy it, although it's not letting me bring up a copy menu. You know, it's not letting me right-click on it. However, if I type it in, or if I highlight it all and hit Control-C, hopefully it would let me paste it. Nope. Huh. Why isn't it letting me copy out of that? That's a problem that I'm not going to solve at this point. Well, you dirty rat. Oh, well, okay, fine. The goal was to make... Lindy, does it let you copy and paste that if you right-click on that text, if you've got it working?
It does not let me copy it.
Oh, phooey. How about here? No? Well, what do you know? I'll be dipped. All right. Okay, so what's the last thing we should do? This is the part that could blow up. If I run it, I guess I don't have a copy of it running anymore. If I run it and I type in garbage, you know, some letters here, it generates an exception. We can't even see the exception because it's in the output window, but it is there. Now, oddly enough, the program keeps running. So it could kind of recover from itself if I went in and I typed in good data instead. But we don't want it to do that. We want to do some exception handling. So we need to find out the exception that is being generated, and it is java.lang.numberFormat exception. I think I can remember that long enough to type it in. So I'm going to go back to the source code and do try, open curly brace, and these guys need to be tabbed over. Then I put my closing curly brace, and then catch parentheses, number format exception. Number format exception, space EX. And if that happens, it's badly formatted data. We just need to make an error message that says that, right? So S_error equals digits only, please. Or maybe we could even say base 10 digits. And set OK equal to false because we ran into a problem. Now it's going to complain here. Variable I1 may not have been initialized. That's very true, because if we catch an exception here, then I1 did not have an initial value. So I should have initialized all these guys to 0 as we went in. That'll get rid of all those errors. And I think it's okay to leave these if statements outside of the try-catch mechanism, because if the values, are left at their default, it's not going to trigger any of these error messages. And if their first one was too large, then I guess it's worth displaying that error message instead. Let's go ahead though and run it one more time just to prove that it works. I'm going to type in some garbage, convert to hex, and it says base 10 digits only, please. Now, if we were super awesome, we'd figure out which one crashed and we highlight it in yellow and let them know that they need to go and fix that one. We're not that super awesome, but it's very possible to do. How can you do that? You can just set the color of it. Like, what if we wanted to change the color of this, change the color of our text to red if there's a problem with it? That ought to be possible to do. So I'm going to scroll down here to where we display our error message, and I'm going to do hex dot set. Is there something called text color? I'm not seeing that. Set foreground color FG. All right, now this is getting into a little bit of annoyance because we have to create a color object and we need to pass it in, and maybe that's too much stuff to do. Oh, check it out. How did it know I was going to make red? That is spooky. I guess, all right, anyways, I'm going to do that again. That's too much fun. Hex dot set foreground color. And I'm just going to double click right there on that letters FG, and it defaults it to red. I guess they're assuming that the color you're going to use is red, but of course you could always change it, right? We can make it dot. I like error messages in, I don't know, magenta, right? Else it's correct. So we want to set the color of the foreground back to black once they get it correct. So I'm just going to copy that statement, or it doesn't take that long to type it, right? So hex dot set foreground. I'm going to double click on that FG. It's going to probably fill it in with dot red again, but I don't want it dot red. I just want it to be black text. Don't know how my cursor got over there, but there we go. There. All right, it's going to look stupid with a magenta color, but I don't care. All right, so I'm going to type in something that makes it fail. Too large. Yeah, that's a bad look. Not liking that. I should have just left it red. Change that. Notice that it doesn't care whether you type in uppercase or lowercase. It's kind of interesting. There's variants. And I'm sure that they're exact same thing. If you want to set your values to RGB, you know the exact color And so you want to set it to RGB, you can do that instead, but we're not that picky. We're just going to make it red, good old red. Type in some garbage. We have a red error message to let us know we done messed up. Type in a good number instead. All right, I like it. I think it's cool. Right now, if they tab in here and then they try to type, it doesn't fill in. Maybe that's good enough. Maybe we'd want to go in and make this a light background color of gray, implying that white is something that is editable, and changing the color of that would mean it's not editable. This will be the last thing I do. I think it'll be the last thing we do for this lecture. But I'm going to highlight that text. I'm going to find the background. I'm going to click it and see if I can find a nice, very, very pale shade of gray. We may not be able to find one that's paler than that color already. As a matter of fact, that's darker. All right, fine. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to leave it white. That's interesting. Well, I could change the rest of the background color to something dark. Not going to mess with it. Don't get picky. All right. So do you got that going? Is it all working?
Yep.
All righty. So I don't think there's anything else we need to play with on it. I think that's a good enough example of creating a graphical user interface using the built-in form designer. One thing I do want to point out is that this thing is just a class. Our user interface is a class, but it uses the extends keyword, which inherits from this class, javax.swing.jframe. And then, like, where's my button? Double click the button. Okay. Like this in1.getTextInto. If I double click in1 and I do navigate to declaration, we can see that it creates all these variables. Each control is just a variable, an object that has been created as part of our class. Now, since they have control of where the user interface form designer puts it, it puts those variables at the bottom rather than the top. And actually, we can't change that. If I do cut and paste, it won't even let me because it's got this gray background. It's saying, don't touch this. As a matter of fact, we see that there. But that's all that it's doing. So if we wanted to create one of these user interfaces by hand rather than using a form designer, the first thing our thing would need to do is to have that kind of line. And then it would need to declare its variables. Those would be part of the class. And if we go through, we would see where hex is instantiated. I'm just going to do Control C, copy that, and Control F to find it. See there's a method called init components. And inside init components, it makes each one of our objects. Then it does a little bit of other stuff. Sets it so that if it gets clicked close, it calls a exit on close. And then it sets these things with their default values that we set through the user interface. Do you remember when we modified it so that the text field had 0 in it? If we went back to the form designer and we made that 1, then when we looked here, we'd see 1. There's the text. And then this goes into some considerable effort, you know, to put it exactly where we laid it onto the screen. There are other ways of doing this. This is just the way that the form designer does it. And you can tell that, you know, that's kind of a bear to do it that way. But we could. And if we go and look, find our main, what does main do? It just creates a new thread and then creates a new object of type lecture queue and calls set visible. Now, honestly, I'm confused. I don't see it actually calling our init components function. The class itself must call that when it wants to. Wait, I saw a reference to it. Okay, the constructor for our class, the very first thing it does is call init components. So main creates a copy of our class, an object of our class right here, sets its visibility to true, because you can make controls appear and disappear. You can make a window appear and disappear. If we want to be jerks, we can make our entire window disappear just because they clicked on the calculate button. No reason to do that. All right, I think that's about enough. It'd be a useful exercise to go through and create a simple graphical user interface, rolling up our sleeves and doing it the hard way rather than the form designer. But once you're given a form designer, you tend to really want to do it that way, in my opinion. Unless, well, anyways, I think we're done. So let's stop here. And I don't see any reason to create a homework assignment based on this. If you look out in the announcements, I have a couple of videos I want y'all to watch.
Yeah, I saw that.
And so they're short, they're kind of entertaining. All you need to do is if you click on each one of these links, it takes you to a little quiz that you can watch the video, and then you can say, yeah, I sure did watch it. It was pretty awesome. And did you get something from it? Well, I guess that had better be an essay field rather than a fill in the blank field. I need to go back and modify that because there's no way you could type in enough to write to do it justice. But don't go nuts. Don't write a book. Just write a couple of sentences from what you learned about it. Or you could just say, I didn't understand a thing, right? Or whatever. Okay. So we could make a Dropbox for this and you could upload whatever you wanted to into it. I'll go ahead and stop the video and then create that.
All right, sounds good.